Okay, well, today we've got the opportunity to talk with Devin Carberry, and I'm really pleased to be able to do that. Devin's a colleague and one who I have observed in the last few years doing an amazing job at Learnlife Barcelona, and I guess he's now heading up the charge where Learnlife Barcelona has had to take its operation into remote operation, so it's happening in people's houses at this time, and as part of that, it's online learning. So welcome, Devin. Great to see you again today, even though I'm in Sydney and you're in Barcelona.
Thanks for having me, Stephen.
Okay, now perhaps you could just share with people what's your actual role at Learnlife.
Director of Learning Programs, which means I oversee our amazingly agile learning team of learning guides. And so responsible for sculpting, creating, and growing the vision with the team, professional development and ongoing training, helping develop learning programs, and all the firefighting that happens in between.
So I was with you in Rwanda when we discovered that things were going to have to change fairly rapidly back in Spain, and the decision was made to shift to remote operations basically within 24 hours. And I guess to your credit, the team were able to pick up the ball and to run with it. What had actually happened before then, and to enable the team to be able to move online even with their very tentative first steps?
Yeah, I mean, as I've seen the press around, that we've moved everything online within 24 hours. I think that's amazing, but the pre-work is somewhat invisible because I don't think it should be expected that anybody can do such a task. I think woven into our DNA as a team is being agile, problem finding and problem solving, moving quickly to address any rising need or challenge. And so we're constantly troubleshooting. I mean, we've started with various pilot groups of learners and had to adapt because we didn't have a playbook in designing Learnlife. We looked at innovations all over the world and had to figure out how do we make that best work for our context. And so it's been constantly an evolutionary process. And so our team has developed tight collaboration skills and the capacity to work well with each other and resiliency in the face of challenges.
You're touching on some interesting things there. If we talk about it from a technological point of view, what technology was in place and active before this sudden jump to remote learning?
Yeah, I mean, all of our program exists, at least the documentation, content curation part of it already existed online using a project management software called Monday. And then we also use that in tandem with a Google Suite. So for every aspect, what we call building blocks of the program. So things like we have core concept labs and Adelante and life navigation skills, different aspects of the program. All the content and schedules and everything existed online. That's how learners submit work. It's how they manage their projects. So that was already there. So it wasn't too much.
What about the skill level of the learning guides? Would you say that were they consistently proficient at working in the online environment, or very variable?
I mean, I think if we're talking about online learning, no, I don't think we had any particular training in how to do that because we weren't working online as learning guides. But as far as skill sets around tools, I mean, I think that, knowing that we wanted to make sure that there is digital access to everything that we did, and that was submitted digitally, there was competency across all learning guides.
Okay, so if we step aside then from the technological side, so we had a team of people, as you're saying, who could use Monday and who also could use basic sort of Google Suite and everything else. What was important, do you think, about the culture that had been developed that enabled the confidence to shift?
The culture among the learning guides, or the culture overall in the learning community?
Well, either, both.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you can imagine for traditional schools, a lot of what we're doing it would be difficult because our community is so strongly based on personal relationships and There's established feedback loops between learners and learning guides so that we can understand what their needs are, and with the families as well, and adapt to those needs. So that's really important, because just in the first 48 hours, we iterated on a number of different aspects of the program as we got feedback. The parents said it's crazy to have the kids in front of the screens for this long. We can't just do translating everything you do in the physical space online. We have to find ways of blending analog and digital. So because those communications channels already existed, and that culture of providing feedback, we were able to adapt. And there's, a half dozen other examples of how we were able in the first week to iterate on what we had already designed based on learner feedback. But you have to have confidence in the people that you're working with to provide good feedback, as well as to act on that feedback. Otherwise, there's no desire to communicate.
So if you're going to give some advice to people who are starting, I guess, from the base of a fairly conventional face-to-face school context, what should be the first thing that you think that they should focus on before they even look at, just let's assume they've got a technology platform, but within the use of that platform, what would you see as critical to creating the potential for success?
I think there's a number of things I would touch on. One is we have to prioritize the mental health and wellness of the learners, because it's really challenging to be stuck at home, to be in potentially what were already precarious family contexts, and to be around that context all day, to not have access to your friends and other things that are typical strategies you deal with to provide happiness and wellness for yourself. And so we immediately had someone from our team become our community manager, who was checking in with learners, seeing how they're doing. We provide coaching for parents on how to set up the optimal learning environment at home, and also just to provide wellness counseling for them as well. And our parent community too, they've started hosting events and check-ins regularly with each other, because they've noticed that's really important for them to have an outlet, because if the parents aren't doing well at home, then obviously that typically affects the learners too. So I'd say wellness as being one of the number one priorities is important. And the second one is to not just try to translate everything you were doing in the classroom or your learning community online, because we're working at home. It's much different. And so supporting learners in developing good routines, but also finding ways to integrate family, finding ways to make do with the resources that are already there. For example, we've managed to do, I'm helping to co-lead a online cooking course, which isn't much of a course. It's more of like a master chef type thing. And we knew all the learners have food at home, but obviously we couldn't expect them to have all the right ingredients. And so we've had to cater challenges that we are doing around specific ideas. So let's talk about sauces. Everybody can make some kind of a sauce with what they have at home. And that allows them to blend digital with analog. So they come in, we share what we've been learning. We get to see pictures and talk and have the social element that's really important. But then we go away from the computers and we get to actually work in our homes, oftentimes with our families or siblings or whoever's around. So it's been really positive for them, and it's nice to see, as we see on the group chat, all the photos rolling in, the encouragement and the desire to share and to keep engaged.
Okay, so that you're raising an interesting point there, that the emphasis on relationship is critical. What are some of the practical ways that's achieved online? What does that look like? Is there a curriculum that's followed, or is it's free form, or what's the session called where you actually allow the kids to give feedback and to talk about themselves?
Yes. So already embedded in our schedule in the physical space was a thrice weekly check-in called Real Talk, in which learners have a chance to talk about what's real in their lives. In this context, obviously, the coronavirus and working at home and family issues that are arising and the difficulty with being at home have been the centerpiece of our conversations. So it's really nice to have a touch point a few times a week with the learners to see how are they doing emotionally, checking in with them. We've been doing a lot of one-on-one calls to learners we know are struggling, to see how they're doing and how we can offer strategies. But I think to just treat children as just brains who need input isn't sufficient. To just continue with the cognitive model of learning and not know that we need to treat the entire child is a mistake.
Okay, so how difficult is it when you're online to sort of see the nuances of kids' emotions? Is it harder than face-to-face? Does the real talk provide the opportunity to sort of dig a bit deeper into see what's actually happening for them?
I think it's presented different challenges. One is just trying to get learners to show up and be presentable enough to want to turn on their video, because it's hard to understand what's going on for them when it's only audio. Even if that means, and we've been trying to encourage learners to get dressed and show up and be in front of the screen, but some of them are still calling from bed under the covers. But I think that does give us a window into their emotional state, more than if they had kind of dolled themselves up to be on camera. I think the biggest challenge is the learners that just aren't showing up, and we don't know why. And so that's why we've had each learner has a member of the team who's responsible for checking in with them daily, and someone who's also responsible for checking with the parents daily. If we flag them as having difficulty attending, as having some kind of wellness-related challenge, and that's helped us get an idea of what's going on for them. And if they're reluctant to get in contact with them, we typically will contact their friends and see if we have any news. And in the first week, there was a significant number of kids who just weren't going online at all. But through this kind of persistent effort, we've re-engaged the majority of them.
So from the kids' perspective, what do they like? What sort of really switches them on in terms of online activities when they're working remotely?
It's funny. So there's talk that this might go on till the end of June, and so we were discussing this to learn. Even just saying that spring break is coming up for us in a week, the learners were really sad that they wouldn't have contact with each other, that they wouldn't be able to do these really cool workshops that we're offering. I think what's been good is we've divided the morning into the more kind of classical academic skill building, knowledge building activities that they would partake in, and then the afternoons are reserved for more high interest, passion based workshops. So we have like a book club where they just read and discuss books. We have one where they're watching the next Netflix show explained and then discussing afterwards. There's science in your home. There's the MasterChef one. There's lots of these really exciting workshops that they can partake in at different levels. And so I think they really value learning new skills in a fun way and in a social way has been really exciting for them. And I think they still want the consistency of knowing that they're engaging in deeper learning in other areas as well.
Okay, so that if we think about the learning guides, the teachers, what do they see as working well from their perspective?
I think we all agree that the afternoon formula is working really well. One of the things that is we're thinking about for after spring break is how do we make things more social? How do we provide authentic ways to check in? How do we use the different pedagogies that most lend themselves to online connecting? So whether that be discussion-based learning, project-based learning, and the likes. So we're going to explore that more. I think we realized quickly that too much screen time is lethal, and the kids are just getting burnt out. We feel like for every hour we're working, it's double what we would normally be working in the physical space. And so knowing when to dip in and out. And so oftentimes it's starting a different one of the building blocks with a check-in that is about not direct instruction, but of checking in about what the challenge is, or what is the thing that we're working on, how are we approaching this, and then moving offline so that the learners can work on it at their home and not have to be in front of the screen, because I think that gives us all a break. And then I think having wildcards throughout the week has been really fun. We had one of the learners on Friday afternoon did an exercise class for all of us, which was exciting. And we have those kind of pop-up things that are happening too to keep the community excited and engaged.
So that probably you touched there briefly on perhaps the last little area we'll cover now, and that's the risk of burnout for the learning guides, the teachers. Mm-hmm. What do you see as critical at these times now in order to maintain the health and well-being of the teaching staff, the learning guides at Learnlife?
I mean, all the things I said about the learners, I think is true for the learning guides. Is we need a feedback loop of how they're doing, what they feel like they're needing. We have our own real talks a few times a week to see how people are doing, because we're managing a lot of stress and anxiety, and this is quite a unique challenge. And so providing a safe space to just say how you're feeling and get support is really important. And yeah, I think one of the things I've been encouraging the learning guides to do now is to figure out which activities are most energy giving and which are most energy draining, and keeping track of that so we can really log, okay, this is the moments in the day where I feel like this is the toughest, and really the return on the energy we're putting in isn't worth it. So those are the things we need to catalog and say, this is not working, we're putting too much effort in and we're not seeing any return, so let's try some other strategy or nix this altogether.
Okay, so last question.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of from the trenches. Now, if someone's stuck in the trenches and they're finding it all too difficult, they've shifted online, but they're not seeing any light in the tunnel, what would be the first step you think an educator should take?
You mean someone who might be working in a more traditional environment and is...
No, they've moved online, they've started the process, but they're feeling overwhelmed and stuck. What's the advice you'd give them?
This is such a rare and unique opportunity to do all kinds of new and exciting things. I think if we can push out of our head whatever timetable we had about what learners were supposed to learn by when, what goals you had for the year, and just if we can not attach ourselves to that and then think completely divergently about what possibilities are online that are exciting and new and that we haven't explored before, that might give us energy and that might open new possibilities. There's a lot of really fun, exciting stuff out there. I can imagine being really frazzled if I had to prep kids for an IB test that they had in a couple of months or whatever these exams were, and burnt myself out trying to make that happen. But if I could drop that pretense and focus on learning and wellness and learner engagement, I think there's a lot of hope to be had, because we're seeing our learners don't want to sign off for spring break. They want to keep moving. And that makes me feel really hopeful. And even though we might have this whole next trimester online, I think the learners are still feeling hopeful that they can find new and even more exciting ways to engage with us.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the conversation today. And hopefully I know you've given a few pearls of wisdom there for people to think through, and thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen.